The controversy over the move to establish NG Eagle from the remnants of Arik Air did take another turn when the Senate committee joins its voice to that of the lower house over the suspension of the issuance of air operator certificates to the startup airline. For many industry participants, it rubs off on the autonomy of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, which the National Assembly helped to bring into law. On the program, we take a look at this and how Arik Air got to this point, and the many parties lending their voices to the situation. Plus, a similar story to the Arik NG Eagle situation in Italy as their national carrier, Alitalia, transforms into ITA after many years of losses. Welcome to Aviation This Week on Channels Television. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi. Our background report is next.
Before now, Arik Air was Nigeria's flag carrier airline with the largest fleet. It came under the ownership of the Assets Management Corporation of Nigeria 4 years ago owing to its huge debts.
Forever! Solidarity! Forever! Solidarity! Forever!
Unions in Arik hold a rally supporting AMCON's divestment policy to float a new airline, NG Eagle, using some of the equipment of Arik Air. Another union in the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria petitions the National Assembly, asking that the issuance of the air operating certificate to the new airline be suspended.
What we wrote to the President for intervention and to stop the issuance of that OAC is as a result of indebtedness, huge indebtedness of this airline to the service providers. If we allow it, they will not pay that debt. And they are deceiving Nigerians, even deceiving government. By the time they get that OOC, that Nigerian Eagle, they will turn around and be saying that it is national carrier, and it is not national carrier. Okay.
As if acting in response to ANAP's request, the aviation committees of the National Assembly asked the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority to suspend the AOC issuance, a move that has pitched the lawmakers against stakeholders in the aviation industry who queried the perceived interference with regulatory functions.
Their oversight constitutional responsibility, but we believe that what they are doing amounts to gross political influence, which is against the 2006 Act. As we speak, ANAP and NEP don't have members in Arik. The people that have members in Arik are Naipia, Nwate, and Asa. So why would somebody run to National Assembly or run to the Senate or the House of Reps to achieve what? Because they are not a debt recovery agency. And it's interference. And that's what we are saying, that is catastrophic. NCA should be given its autonomy. Don't come and twist. AMCON is a legal body that you can sue and be sued.
In another twist, the National Union of Air Transport Employees say the Ministry of Aviation may not be on the same page with AMCON.
Information available to Nwate, however, suggests that the issue of indebtedness of Arik Air to FAN and the NCA is only a smoke screen. It is understood that the real issue is the politics of a new national carrier. In particular, Nwate hereby calls on the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and the Chief of Staff to the President to urgently intervene in these matters and facilitate an immediate ceasefire and chart a path to progress on these sensitive issues.
While the battle for the soul of Arik Airlines and NG Eagle remain in the balance, a source close to AMCON believes creating the startup airline is a way to sustain jobs, citing the following reasons. Arik Airline is technically insolvent because Arik's liabilities are more than its assets. A former major shareholder wants his debts waived. AMCON says it has given the room to pay some of the debts, but this has not worked. AMCON says it is running the carrier to cover costs, but inadequate to sustain Arik as an entity. And there will be losses for all parties, even with the NG Eagle option. While AMCON believes it is taking the best exit rule in line with its regulatory functions, many industry practitioners insist the criteria to award AOC is strictly under the purview of the NCAA. The regulatory agency is recognized internationally as an institution to regulate civil aviation, and its autonomy is not negotiable.
On our interview segment, an aviation pilot with about 4 decades of flight and management experience, Captain Michelia, is our guest. He believes the AOC journey for any airline is tough, owing to the NCAA's oversight, and it should not be truncated by politics. He starts by providing an insight into how the Nigerian Civil Aviation Act of 2006 came to be, giving the regulator its autonomy.
When democracy was ushered in, they went further because we were striving to get our country out of what we were being tagged that time as bad, unsafe areas. Now, unsafe in the sense that our airspace was classified as not safe. You find, or if you recall, oil workers had to fly from British Airways to London in order to come to Abuja. So the government looked at it, and the same National Assembly at that time saw the need to enact a law that will give autonomy to the civil aviation authorities. That will now give it the international recognition and place it in a very safe corridor for international visitors and investors. So they enacted 2006 Act, which is right now under review, because ideally 10 years, every 10 years, it should be reviewed. Now, while this is going on, we are now hearing that the National Assembly is ordering NCAA not to issue an AOC. That's the question. And I would say that is rather unfortunate. It's like we are going back. And I think the National Assembly in itself, for those of us who understand it and the international community, they'll be looking at them in conflict with themselves. Because the same National Assembly ensure that the NCAA becomes autonomous. If the ministry had said, for example, that they must not issue certain AOC, the National Assembly is where we would have run to go and complain. But now who do we run to? When the person who should step in and say, no, we are not a court, but this process, you have to leave them to do their job in according to the law. But I think NCAA is handicapped in this case. They are not protected, because they have taken their autonomy from them. It will take a very bold worker in NCAA to challenge the authorities that are forcing them to do against their law. Do we have the situation where people will be bold enough to say, I am not going to listen to you, I am going to do what the law says. And part of this law I'm using, you provided it for me. And show them the act and show them the regulations. If a company has gone through an AOC process and is waiting to be issued as AOC and is being denied for whatever reason, then that is very unfortunate. And it's a back and forth process until demonstration phase, which means what you said you have and the airplanes you say you operate and the people you say will be in place, go and show us. So they come, they inspect their airplanes. Perhaps the airplane would have been inspected prior to this time and imported, or it has to come. And then you start to demonstrate what you said you were going to do. If you want to pick passengers from Abuja to Lagos and company, then you carry them without the passengers this time, and they will see how you operate. So once this is done, that is it. So there should be no interference from anywhere again until you either commit an offense, which is reported to them, or you self-surrender your operations. Otherwise, you should be operating seamlessly.
From Nigeria to Italy, as its national carrier, Alitalia transforms to ITA. Rome's Fiumicino International Airport has been virtually short of passengers as Alitalia, a one-time symbol of Italian style and glamour, brought low by economic mismanagement, handed over to its downside successor, Italia Trasporto Aereo, ITA, after 75 years. Alitalia was founded in 1946 and the government has run to its rescue many times, spending more than 8 billion euros just in the last 3 years, and it has been run by state-appointed administrators since 2017 to avoid being liquidated. After seeking to sell Alitalia to private investors, In 2020, Rome surrendered to the disastrous consequences of the pandemic for the airline sector and decided to create ITA from its ashes. The new carrier, in which the government will invest 1.35 billion euros over 3 years, will start with 52 jets and 2,800 employees, compared with around 110 aircraft and a workforce of 10,000 for Alitalia. A passenger coming on board the new airline is hopeful for a change in operations. Under a deal negotiated with the European Commission, there must be a clear discontinuity between Alitalia and its successor, and the new carrier needs to be profitable by the end of its 2021-2025 business plan. However, Alitalia's legacy of high costs, mismanagement and heavy political and trade union influence may be hard for ITA to shrug off. For the new state-owned airline to be a success, an expert says it must be run without political interference.
The new airline really should be allowed to operate on commercial terms with commercial acumen amongst its leadership, to be free from political interference, basically. Whether that happens, I'd be really skeptical. It has not been the case in the past. And to actually make decisions based on market demand, based on profitability, is really the only way forward to avoid having another repetition of state funding being put in and keeping the rump of a business alive, which in market terms would logically have failed by now. But competition is going to be there, it's going to be tough, and only time will tell how this pans out or whether it will be simply another extension of a loss-making operation. It's an airline which has always faced a challenge of political involvement. Italy, in common with a number of countries, feels it needs to have its own flag carrier. Politicians always want to get involved in the running of the business. They don't, in my experience, know better than typical airline management.
ITA could struggle to establish itself in a market that is already well served in Italy by short-haul and long-haul carriers, or it's an airline that's going to start off much smaller than Alitalia. Shouting insults at the Italian government and beating on the windows of Rome's Fiumicino International Airport, hundreds of Alitalia workers expressed their anger towards the decision to permanently ground the 75-year-old Alitalia after years of financial losses and failed rescue attempts.
Alitalia workers are here today because yesterday actually was, they said it was the last day, of the Alitalia after 74 years of, a great company, we think. And yesterday was a kind of funeral. They think we celebrate a funeral. It's not like that because I know all the workers are here to keep going on the fight.
Uncertainty over the future of Alitalia's 11,000 employees has clouded ITA's launch, and a strike by staff last month laid bare the problems stemming from the transition between the two airlines.
The pandemic has been the biggest shock that aviation has ever seen. It's both the deepest and the longest crisis faced by airlines globally. There have been a number of failures, but that aside, Alitalia is a very particular case. It has had structural losses for many, many years with only very fleeting and occasional profitability and a long history of backwards and forwards excess political involvement.
The new carrier is in talks to buy Alitalia's brand and is expected to maintain the traditional green, white, red livery.
And yesterday was a kind of funeral.
The launch of a nimbler carrier leaves a question mark over the future of more than 7,000 Alitalia workers who will be put under a temporary layoff scheme paid for by the government until at least September 22. When Aviation This Week returns, News Flash is next. Do join us again. Passengers within the departure hall of the Alitalia Mohammed Airport 2 in Lagos.
The terminal is Nigeria's first build, operate and transfer terminal and has been in operation for 14 years. At this meeting with journalists, the terminal operator by Courtney Aviation Services is calling on the federal government to implement the approval granted it to commence regional operations from its terminal to ease passengers' burden.
We've been granted permission to start regional flights. We've signed an agreement with government to this effect. Till date, there is no implementation of the agreement. All the airlines want to start regional flights from here. We have prepared. If you've not gone around this place, you don't know how big it is. I believe about a third of this place has never been opened. Never been opened. All preparatory for regional flights.
Its eyes are also set on the ongoing concession of 4 international airport terminals. The airports include the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, Murtala Mohammed International Airport, Lagos, Malam Aminu Kano International Airport, Kano, and the Port Harcourt International Airport.
There is a bid going on. Every other community in part of Nigeria, what will happen is that the authorities will call on those who have done it well and say, please, we're going to give you a first option because you have demonstrated capacity.
The federal government says the request for qualification RFQ to run the facilities efficiently and profitably is open to firms or consortia with track records in airport terminal management and a net worth of 30 billion naira per bidding firm or consortium. The concession is built to run for a 20 to 30-year tenure in a BOT model. Waving signs like, "Let me call my own shots" and "Stop the mandate." Some 200 Boeing co-employees and others have staged a protest over the plane maker's COVID-19 vaccine requirement for US workers. Boeing said it will require its 125,000 US employees to be vaccinated by December the 8th under an executive order issued by President Joe Biden for federal contractors. Earlier, Boeing said employees must either show proof of vaccination or have an approved reasonable accommodation based on a disability or sincerely held religious belief by December the 8th. Major US airlines, including American Airlines, have said they will also meet the deadline imposed on federal contractors, as has aircraft parts manufacturer Spirit Aerosystems. Several employees at the protest said they were applying for exemptions. Boeing has said its mandate does not apply immediately to its sites in Texas, where Republican Governor Greg Abbott issued an executive order on Monday barring COVID-19 vaccine mandates by an entity, including private employers. President Biden has said more U.S. businesses should obligate workers to receive COVID-19 vaccinations, calling the move vital to ending the pandemic and sustaining the economy. Pakistan International Airlines has suspended flights to the Afghan capital, Kabul, after what it called heavy-handed interference by Taliban authorities, including arbitrary rule changes and intimidation of staff. The suspension came as the Taliban government ordered the airline, the only international company operating regularly out of Kabul, to cut ticket prices to levels seen before the fall of the Western-backed Afghan government in August. Earlier, the Taliban warned PIA and Afghan carrier Cam Air that their Afghan operations risked being blocked unless they agreed to cut ticket prices, which have reached levels increasingly out of reach for most Afghans. With most international airlines no longer flying to Afghanistan, tickets for flights to the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, have been selling for as much as $2,500 on PIA, according to travel agents in Kabul, compared with $120 to $150 before. The Afghan Transport Ministry said in a statement that prices on the route should be adjusted to correspond with the conditions of a ticket before the victory of the Islamic Emirate, or the flights would be stopped.
Boeing has signed a deal with Chinese company, the Guangzhou Aircraft Maintenance Engineering Company Limited, to establish two 767 freighter conversion lines next year in Guangzhou, capital of South China's Guangzhou province, as global airlines strive to cushion blows and make more profits from the buoyant air cargo business amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The deal announced at the recently concluded Airshow China 2021 in Guangdong will make Guangzhou the biggest freighter conversion center around the world for Boeing. Gameco, a maintenance, repair and overhaul provider, part owned by China Southern Airlines, already runs 3 737 conversion lines through earlier deals with Boeing. The new deal adds wide-body jets into the mix.
This year, we still hired nearly 600 people in Gameco, because we are growing. We also built a new hangar at the Bayonne airport that will be ready end of this year. And we are building a maintenance campus with a component center and composite repair center. And these facilities together, I think they will add about 1,500 to 2,000 jobs over the time when they're in full swing.
Aircraft that have been parked because of COVID travel restrictions are the most likely candidates for conversions. Of special interest are models that are about to retire from passenger operations but are still considered young for cargo fleets. With an online shopping boom and an urgent global need for vaccines and medical supplies, it's hardly surprising that airlines are rushing to make up for lost revenues by carrying cargo instead of passengers. The International Air Transport Association projects 30% of global revenues in aviation this year will come from freight, more than doubling pre-COVID level.
With the aviation sector in tatters due to the COVID-19 pandemic, young French people are massively turning away from flight crew schools and ground staff trainings. A small class is in session as Catherine Tastavine, a flight attendant of 40 years turned trainer, sees registration fall by an estimated 75% at the flight attendant school she founded.
My first question was, is it really worth it to enroll for the flight attendant training? Since there are less flights and there were many layoffs, notably with Air France, which is what we hear of most. She reassured us immediately and told us that hiring had already resumed. There's actually someone in the class who told me she has a friend just hired by an airline company.
Total passenger traffic dropped by 60% worldwide in 2020, as estimated by the International Civil Aviation Organization, as French national carrier Air France also suffered a €7.1 billion loss over the same year, prompting the company to lay off 8,500 of its employees. While Airbus announced 5,000 redundancies for France alone, for some students of the school, these are daunting times and no job optimism. Global passenger traffic numbers are not expected to go back to pre-COVID-19 levels before 2024, according to the International Air Transport Association. But Catherine remains optimistic for her students. Catherine and her students hope younger and perhaps less costly flight attendants will progressively replace the older generation as the health situation returns to normal.
This is where our flight lands. It's bye for now. I'm Bukola Joe Ketumbi.